What's up? It's your boy Cooked here. I'm just going to be doing a quick video explaining the usage of my new program, ViewLab. Smashed this together over the last week or so. And basically, ViewLab just lets you, as it says there, configure the OpenXR render height per applications. So the render height in OpenXR, that's the vertical FOV tangent. Some people might be familiar with this. So we're not talking about horizontal, we're talking about vertical. And in nearly all most VR headsets, there is a whole bunch of vertical space that helps with immersion. That's why VR is very cool in a lot of games. It really feels like you're in the world because you're seeing so much periphery. But it turns out that that vertical periphery isn't really that useful. You can still feel just as immersed with an expansive horizontal periphery and a limited vertical periphery. You just have to imagine you're like wearing a racing helmet, or you're like a medieval knight with like an iron visor on, or something like that. It's a strange concept, but basically this program just turns your VR view into a slice. It lets you decide what amount of the image you want to render vertically. Say 40%, 60%, 20%, whatever you want. And you can even use this function to split this feature between the top and bottom of the headset. Say you want 40% of the screen directly in the middle of the screen, no worries, just use this function. If you want 40% of the screen, but you only want it to render from the midpoint of the screen downwards, so we're missing 50% up here, and we've got 40% of the screen displaying the game, and then we've got 10% of the screen down here, that's also a black bar. We could do that by setting it up like this. We're going to have 0% of the top and 40% of the bottom of the screen. Press save, and that's going to save a layer in our VR runtime stack that's going to tell the game, request this many pixels, request 40% of the vertical render, please, or whatever the hell. And you can do this down here per application with some profiles and stuff like this. Try not be too long-winded, but basically every VR application that you launch, after you press reload apps, they're going to start appearing here. You can enable or disable the program per exe here. Say you don't want it to affect iRacing, but you do want it to affect Assetto Corsa or something like that. You could do that with this menu. The menu below it is for custom profiles. Say on iRacing, maybe I want 20% of the top of my screen and 10% of the bottom of my screen for a combined total render height of 30%, biased towards the top of my screen. We could save that, and now iRacing has those values written. But say for iRacing, maybe I just want that 30%, but I want it split between the middle of the screen equally. You can do it just like that, and this program is going to have logic to remember those values and apply them next time we launch the application. So what does this mean for us though, performance-wise? If we come back here, we're going to do some testing with Assetto Corsa. By the way, this program works with every single VR application I've launched, every single VR game. I've never had an issue with it, as long as we're talking OpenXR. But the main applications of a very aggressive tangent, say something below 40%, is going to be in sim racing. I'll give you an example here. So this process, Open Composite ACS, that's the process for Assetto Corsa. You can see I have Content Manager open in the background. We have ACS set to use our global values. Up here on our global values, we're going to just disable the program for now. All right, so No functionality. Let's just wake up my VR headset over here. We've got a Quest 3 and launch the game. So you can see I have some pretty beefy settings here. We're running post-processing with the pure PP filter, with some pretty heavy MSAA, anisotropic, shadows, all the rest. It's pretty beefy. Let's do the content manager benchmark real quick and just see what happens. Okay, so Windows popped up on my display. Turn that down. Okay, so you can see I'm using a plugin in OBS. It's called the OpenXR Mirror Capture, and it just captures the requested render of the OpenXR pipeline and displays it in OBS. So basically, we've just launched Assetto Corsa and it's given us this. It's given us this big old box. This is what's being rendered by our GPU and displayed in the headset. Headset probably looks something like this. You know? It's a whole bunch of space. We've got a really nice view of our roof there. You feel me? We've got a really nice view of our legs. We've got a really nice view of our roof. Oof. I feel motion sick. Yeah, and if we come out of the benchmark back into the content manager, boom. I see that. Pretty crappy performance, huh? Anyway, let's get to the point here. Obviously, we're going to have pretty crappy performance. If we've got all our settings turned up and we're doing a 1.5 times super sample, that's the godlike setting in virtual desktop, we're requesting a lot of pixels. And as you just saw there, most of those pixels were wasted on our roof and wasted on our feet. Let's neaten that up a little bit. So we're going to come back over to ViewLab. We're going to enable ViewLab just with our global value, which is a 40% vertical tangent, requesting 40% of the total render height. Let's launch this benchmark again. And you'll see immediately this box is a very different shape now. It's more of a rectangle instead of a square. We've successfully cut off 60% of the square somehow. Magic. Anyway, I'll move this around, try and give you better visualization of what we're seeing here. This is the left eye being captured through the OpenXR Mirror Capture plugin. But if we were to move this around, reposition it, maybe scale it up, fit it to the size of our display, looks good, right? Still, see a nice view of those crossbars on the roof, though. You could probably go a bit crazier with it. Let's exit out real quick. Have a look at this. Ooh. 90 FPS. Huh? Wait, we just went from 60 to 90 FPS? That's crazy. No way. Insane. Let's try 120 FPS real quick, don't mind me. I'm gonna put on my handy dandy headset here, open the virtual desktop menu, confirm we're on godlike. VR graphics quality godlike, yep. VR frame rate, I'm gonna put that up to 120 now. Maximum frame rate the headset allows. Surely we don't get 120 hertz. Stable, right? Let's try that one more time. Hit the benchmark. We haven't changed anything. Just using a 40% global value at this point. On. Benchmark opens. Doopty 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 doop. That'll do. Close that benchmark. What do we get? Okay. Fair enough. We can't get 120 FPS. Reasonable. Understandable, right? I haven't got an insane graphics card. It's only a 7800 XT. Surely 120 FPS solid isn't possible in VR, right? Surely. Sure. Wait. What if we just lower the vertical tangent more? That's crazy. Alright. Let's half the vertical tangent. Let's get really aggressive with it. A 20% total render height. Now, personally, I wouldn't go any further than something like 15% as an extreme value. This is just kind of a proof of concept of the performance gain that can come from this program. So we want 20% total render height. And I'm just going to be a little strange with it. I'm going to ask it to render 15% in the top of my screen and 5% in the bottom of my screen. Still 20% total render height. Just because. Let's go back. Let's hit this benchmark one more time. Oh, we're back in. Would you look at that? The OpenXR mirror capture plugin has once again turned into even more of a rectangle. Look at this. This is the whole source we're getting now. We used to be getting sent a square through this OBS plugin. And now we're being sent this slice. Let's scale this up to the size of the screen. Looks good. Hold up. It's almost like the bit rate of the image is being compressed into a smaller area instead of spreading 2 to 400 to or whatever bit rate you're getting over the whole screen. You're compressing and you're using optimally that bit rate right in the center of your screen, and that's even noticeable past the headset. That's noticeable in capture plugins like this. Let's scale this up a bit more. We can afford to cut off some of this and just get crazy with it. Doesn't look bad. There, we could zoom it out a bit. A little. Looks good. Anyway, let's check out performance stats. Surely going from 40% render to 20% render wasn't that much, right? Surely. We just did that whole benchmark, and our minimum FPS was 119. Let's review this again. You see my settings here. I've got pure on, maximum, 4 times, and it's 16 times very high, 4096 high, 2048, 2 faces per frame. Custom shader patch enabled. We're not doing any sort of downscaling or any secret sauce like that, just pure pixels, 120 FPS. You tell me. Some people in the VR scene would argue that it's unimmersive to have such a thin render slice. But in my opinion, what is immersive is ultra high fidelity, ultra high super sampling. Values 1.5 times the native pixel of your display. Maybe even further, 2 times the native pixel density. Why not? Right? Being able to support that by cutting out a whole bunch of useless information. And then on top of that, stacking that with the increases of compressing your bitrate as well into that centralized part of the screen. It's easier for your GPU. Your GPU can super sample higher. It can push higher FPS, make your game look clearer, make your game look crisper, make your game look smoother. And that for me is immersion. Immersion is not a gigantic square of blurry fucking pixelated squares that you get fed at 60 frames a second. Oh, but you've got FOV. No. Immersion is ultra stable FPS. Immersion is ultra crisp detail. And due to the nature of VR scene right now, I think that's only really possible through things like FSR or say foveated rendering or say these other gimmicks, right? A vertical tangent or ViewLab, this program that I've just made. I think that's a pretty awesome example of the performance that you can gain easily on your system. How many gamers do you think are out there? How many sim racers that are just wasting their GPU away, probably playing their video games on medium or high settings in virtual desktop, probably downscaling their game actually from the native resolution of their headset just to be able to barely get a solid 72 or 80 FPS. And all they really have to do is apply a vertical tangent, cut half their screen off. And the whole experience gets so much better. Seriously. I'm going to wrap this one up by including a video of me in my rig sim racing with a very aggressive vertical FOV tangent through ViewLab using maybe around about 18% of the total render height of the headset. I'm going to show you an ultra clear, ultra crisp 120 FPS solid at pretty much maximized settings in both Assetto Corsa and iRacing. You can't argue with that. Talk soon. Alright guys, so we're going to start it off with iRacing. I'll load into the Nordschleife here. That's with OpenXR disabled. So we're requesting full vertical FOV here at godlike mode in virtual desktop, which is around about a 1.5 times super sample. In my GPU spinning up. That's a lot of pixels. All right, boom. Here we are in game. I don't know if you can see that. Let me help. It's about 60 FPS. If I get on track. Ooh, it's even worse. Gone down to around about 50 FPS, 45 FPS. See how much of our roof and our wheel and our feet we're rendering? Yeah, let's get out of here. All right, we're going to enable ViewLab at my preference, 18% total render height for sim racing. Reload iRacing. So remember that value. We just had 45 to 50 FPS. Oh, what's that? 120. Let's do it. It's 120 hertz solid. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing here, but for Assetto Corsa. Content Manager, I'm going to disable ViewLab. Alright, here we are. Looks like we've got about 60 FPS. Let me try and help you see that. Oh, very good. Let's get out of here. Once again, I'm going to enable ViewLab. $120. Ooh. I think it dipped there for a second. never do, eh? Pretty simple, pretty easy. Download my tool, install it, enable it, set the tangent value that you're comfortable with. I'd recommend 40% to 20% for sim races, 40% to 60% to 80% for any other kind of like open world gamers where you really want to see a lot of vertical periphery. But yeah, I'd say anything above 80% vertical FOV, a little bit of a waste of your GPU's resources. You should really be cutting the vertical render with my tool and then reinvesting into super sampling. Cheers. If you guys have any comments, questions, advice, feedback, let me know down in the comments below. Cheers.